Hey there, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I hope you are having a good week. Thank you so much for being here. I was going to say, it feels like it's been a long time since I've been here doing one of these little pep talks. I guess it's probably been just about exactly a month, but it seems like a lot's happened since then. So I hope that you are well. I am excited for today's presentation because I actually do have slides. I'm sharing a new content that I've been working on, and I think will really help folks who are either have been job searching or are ready to start the job search fresh. Both are hard for different reasons. Whether you're starting for the first time or restarting, I'm glad you're here. I think I'm going to be able to hopefully offer some tips and tools that are going to make this a lot easier for you to drive forward going into the new year. So if you're here, feel free to say hello. Let me know where you're watching from, where you are in your job search process. If there's anything you're hoping to get out of today, I'd love to hear from you. Hey, Pam. Yes, you too. I hope your year is off to a good start. Knock on wood, right? Things stay good. All right, I'm going to switch up my slides. I think this is probably the best view for me to be small and for the slides to be big going forward. So if you are watching, I want you to know, or if you're watching a replay in the next 24 hours, so it's Wednesday, January 19th, so really anytime before Thursday, tomorrow at the same time, I've reactivated the early bird discount code on our winter accelerator. I'm going to share the code at the end of the presentation, not as like you have to stay this whole time, but just because that's where I put it. So if you want that, make sure to check back. We have 4 spots left. And if you're interested, we'd love to have you. But let me just dive in because I think today's workshop is going to be helpful in and of itself on its own. So today's workshop is launch or relaunch your job search. And what are we doing? We are assessing where we are at and what we need to, wrong screen here, to move forward in the job search process. And if you're not familiar with me, my name is Jen Walker-Wall. I'm the founder of Work Wonders Careers. And for just about this will be my 8th year helping people land new jobs and thrive at work. So I've now spent just as much time helping people land jobs as I was on the other side of the table, which is where a lot of my experience and the experience of my team comes from, working with job seekers in the hiring process as hiring managers or recruiters, or working closely with people, in the role of career coach as well. So what you're going to hear today is sort of how we've operationalized, the experience I had on the hiring side of the table into something that folks on the other side of the table can execute to help them stand out. So I'm really excited to kind of show you that translation today in the form of just a few simple shifts that you can make in your own job search efforts. Obviously, we'd love to be connected here on LinkedIn. If we're not connected, please feel free to send me a connection request. And you can also find us on Instagram and TikTok. But let me just offer some questions here, and feel free to just drop an emoji in the chat if any of these apply for you. You email yourself jobs or flag jobs, save jobs maybe, but you don't find yourself consistently applying. Or maybe you're consistently applying or sending out emails, but your requests and applications are kind of going unanswered, so it feels like you're hearing crickets back. You sign up for a bunch of webinars, but you are not necessarily executing what you're doing here. You're not really necessarily engaged in the job search process. Maybe you're more in a research process. And maybe the process feels so overwhelming that just the idea of getting started feels really, really hard right now. So if any one of those feels familiar, please know you're in good company. And if you're thinking right now that 2 or 3 or maybe all 4 of these feel familiar, you're in good company too, because usually when people come to us, they are in at least 2 of these, check at least 2 of these boxes here. So what I want to share today are just a few simple takeaways just to keep things really straightforward for you. I'm going to offer 5 shifts that you can make. And 5 kind of ways to kind of think about moving your job search forward based on where I see job searches getting stuck or losing traction or not getting traction at all. And the goal here is, I always tell my clients, if I had a silver bullet to landing a new job, I would sell that instead, but I don't. What I have is a process and, some tactics that I think can really help you get clear, build confidence as you go, manage your expectations, elevate your presentation. And that done consistently is what yields really great results. And by great results, I mean interviews, offers that you're excited to accept, right? So that's what we want. We want for our clients to land jobs that are a great fit. I'm going to talk about how to manage your expectations and find support along the way, how to take action where it will be most impactful for your job search. Right now, not everyone's job search is going to look exactly the same. And that's really important to keep in mind, especially, because we run group programs and community for our job seeking clients. It doesn't mean everyone's doing the same thing at the same time. People need to kind of tune into what it is that they need. And we have some ideas on what might help you do that. And of course, if you have questions at any time, or if you want to share feedback on where you're at in your job search and maybe what would be helpful for you next, drop your questions in the chat at any time. I can pretty much see comments. I'm pretty sure if there's a little bit of a delay, but I'm happy to take your questions here. So one of the first things that I see, and I especially have heard so much this year already, is this idea of not being in the right place to start your job search process. Like, you need more information, you need more clarity, you need to be more certain. And so because I've done this for a while at this point, this is like a pattern that I see quite often in people, is that they think their clarity and confidence building aspect of their job search is separate from like the execution and application component of their job search. And I really don't think that that's true. So I want to talk about building clarity and confidence into your job search process so that you can both get traction and feel clearer and more confident about what you're doing. And here's where I see a lot of these questions kind of popping up. So here's what the questions are. What if my next job is worse than this one? What if nobody understands my story? Like, what if I'm making a transition, or I want to make a transition and I'm worried like it's not going to make sense? What if my gap is too long? Maybe they have beliefs like I'm not where I should be or where I want to be or where my peers are. And also thinking that this process is somehow easier for other people than it is, for you. And these kind of questions can prevent people from moving forward, because I think, much like anything, if we don't think there's any chance of success, it's hard to kind of psych ourselves up to engage in the process. And if we have these questions and have these fears and have these concerns, I think it can be difficult to imagine what a great opportunity might actually look like for us. So I just want to talk a little bit. I could probably give a whole workshop on job searching with fear, but I want to just do as much service as I can with a couple of slides here, which is like, how do we help people kind of transition from like, I have to have all of this figured out and be certain about where I'm going and what I'm doing and what I'm bringing to the table, to I'm going to figure out what to do next, but I'm also going to start my job search process. And one of the ways that we encourage people to do that is to remind people that you are the leader, you are the manager of your own job search. We are not just here to be chosen. And if you struggle to get selected, to go to interviews, or to get offers, it can feel like you're just like, please choose me, please select me. But that's not necessarily where we find clients getting jobs that are great fits. You may get jobs, but you may not get a job that's a great fit, which is really where we want our clients to be, right? So ask yourself, what are you actively choosing right now? Are you actively choosing to apply for jobs and be curious and learn and see what your fit might be or how your resume might work if you're trying to make a transition? Or are you like trying to, narrow yourself into the tiniest, window of job responsibilities and job titles as a sense of clarity before you start applying? And what I find is that when people start applying earlier, they learn more and they learn faster. And that process of connecting with other people and hearing about other people's jobs or what teams are looking for really helps them say like, oh, this would be a good fit or this wouldn't be a good fit. Here's what I'm going to look for. In other words, it's much easier to kind of optimize and revise your job search if you start first, right? I'm sure that's not a huge surprise, but might be a helpful reminder. Turning your fears into questions. Like these fears and questions here, these are important. I don't know the answers to all of these. You don't know the answer to all of these. So, like, what we want to do is try to find a way to operationalize some of these and bring them into our job search process. What do we need to know about a job to know that it's going to be a better fit for us than our last one, that it's not going to be worse than the one we have now? What does your relationship with your manager need to look like? What do the responsibilities need to look like? What kind of questions can you ask when you go into a place? And if you can't figure out the exact wording of a question you'd be comfortable asking, at least at the front end of the process, figure out what it is you want to know. And we can always find some professional, polite ways to kind of ask the questions and also to observe and make sure that we're going into an environment that's going to fuel our success. Another thing that I think is underrated is practicing and experimenting with storytelling strategies. So, of course, telling stories can be difficult for a lot of reasons, like when they're personal and they reflect, something that was a challenge for us. So, when we kind of give ourselves permission to figure out what that story is, what parts of it we want to share, we do that really by practicing and distilling. And I'll share some tips for that in the next shift as well. Building skills and connections along the way. I mean, a lot of clients find that there's, especially if you're trying to make a shift, that there are some skills that you need to kind of move yourself forward, and you may or may not be confident in those skills. While you're job searching, it's perfectly okay to be taking classes, to be teaching yourself different applications, to be downloading trial periods and familiarizing yourself with applications you're finding in the job descriptions or qualifications of the posts that you're interested in. So remember that can be a part of your search process and doesn't need to kind of precede the job search process. And getting really clear on what you have to offer now and what you still want to learn. This is a really great way to make sure that you are focusing on the right kinds of jobs. And what you can't always tell by a job posting, you can start to figure out more easily as you start having conversations at the interview stages. So get clear on sort of where you feel like your strengths are and what you might feel like you want to be able to learn so that you can assess whether there's the capacity for learning in the kind of job that you'll be going into. Because some people are hiring so you can hit the ground running, and some really want to get the right person in the role and will train accordingly. And I would argue that those are two different kinds of jobs. Yes, so you're so welcome for the webinar. Let me move the slide ahead so people can read. What is the course you mentioned earlier? Will a recording be available for review later? This will be out for 24 hours. So this is kind of a limited time live, so you can watch this for 24 hours. And I think what you're referring to is the Winter Accelerator. That's what I mentioned earlier. That I can talk a little bit more about that. That's our 4-week job search accelerator. We do them seasonally, and our deadline to register is this Friday, and we start on Monday with a small cohort of job seekers. So feel free to DM me, but I'll also talk a little bit more about that at the end. So here are some ways that you'll know you're moving towards making progress on this particular shift, is that you're aware of your own decisions and you're giving yourself credit for them. You have more information about potential opportunities. So instead of just saying I don't know, you can say I'm not going to be pursuing that because it lists X or it requires me to do A, B, and C, and I'm not interested in that, right? So really kind of honing in on where you're focusing and why. You're no longer just scrolling. You're actually, applying for jobs, and you have potential questions or areas to explore for the next steps. And if you were to go to an interview or have a conversation, what about that job you needed to learn more of. You're so welcome. I'd be happy to. Thanks for asking. I'll talk more about the accelerator at the end too. The next piece of this is really grounding your job search and goals in your experience, right? In your needs here. So I talked a little earlier about how, not every job seeker needs to do the same thing. Not every job search needs to look exactly the same. So let me rearrange my screen here. There we go. So there's kind of 3 steps to this reflection phase. And if you've been to my webinars or workshops before, you've probably heard me talk about these 3 places, right? So we do some prompts and exercises and coaching conversations to help people really reflect on their work and really just give themselves the capacity in this process to think about what their work has meant to them internally and what lessons they're taking away from it. And we also do things like reviewing active job postings, not with the pressure of needing to apply, but with more of a sense of curiosity, like to explore them freely without focusing on what we think we're qualified for or what we think makes sense or what we think will pay well, but like just seeing where our curiosity goes and looking for patterns and themes that emerge in jobs that feel compelling to us for one reason or another. Another thing about the review stage that I'll just say quickly when you're looking at job postings is that for people who've been really challenged in their current work, or have struggled in their career, finding job postings that they're excited about can be a real challenge. And I think that's because people enter this process with limited optimism sometimes, which I completely appreciate. So, what I want to suggest here is that instead of just focusing on jobs that you're excited about, consider opportunities that you're curious about, that you find compelling or intriguing or want to learn more. That's where I try to set the baseline for expectation. The flip side of that coin is that sometimes really compelling and like snazzy and cute, strategic job postings with like branded language and all kinds of stuff in it can sound really good and also not lead to an environment that's super healthy. So the job posting is just like one aspect of how we're evaluating the opportunity. And I'd much rather, if you're curious, that you take the time to learn more and set yourself up to do so there. And then, I always put in a pitch here for writing, and I know Pamela will back me up on this because she is a writer. Writing is how we learn. When your college professors assign writing assignments, it's not just because, we like to, torture our students into doing unnecessary work. It's really a chance for you to take ownership of your learning, to process, to remember, to document, right? Because we're going to go into the next phase, which is about conveying your value effectively. And the first place to really do that is to capture the work in a way that is meaningful to you. And that's why this step is so important. All three of these pieces and this step in general this is internal. This is the coaching work that we do with our clients, is really helping you figure out what you're excited about, what has worked for you, what hasn't worked, what you need to move away from. And you don't have to worry about making it sound good or fit on your resume or go on your LinkedIn profile. This is fully internal. And so many people skip this aspect of it and go right to trying to sound good on paper. And I think actually, if it sounds good to you first, we can always make it look good on paper. But first, we need to kind of go through the process of really figuring out what we need and what we're looking for ourselves. Thank you, Pamela. I know I can always count on you to back me up on the importance of writing here. So these are some of my favorite prompts. What are you most proud of? If you only do one prompt, if you only spend, 5 minutes doing self-reflection before going into your job search, this is the prompt that I would use, because I think it will help you generate things that are very values aligned, but also compelling, experience and qualifications, and perhaps examples that you can share in your resume or in interviews as you go through the job search process. But a few others that I recommend. What do you want more of, less of? What kind of environment or culture do you do your best work in? That's really key for a lot of people. So I definitely recommend taking these questions and doing some thinking as part of your own documentation and reflection work here. Pamela said something. Your writing exercises have been instrumental for me. Oh, this makes me so happy. Thank you for saying this, Pamela. Well, thank you for validating all the writing I ask people to do, because I know it can seem like a lot of work and it can seem unproductive sometimes, but I think it really does help you, align things very well. I use this a lot in my business, actually. Sometimes I have to career coach myself. And so when I'm, trying to figure out my own priorities, I have to say, like, what is working really well for me and what my life looks like right now, and what are the things I need to like delegate or find a way to eliminate. So I think it's very useful too. So how will you know you're making progress here? Your ability to tailor your resume will get easier and faster because you will have all the content ready to go, and it will just be a matter of like editing it and selecting the right examples. You'll be able to just be, on your game here. You won't have to like do the work of writing and editing in the same step. It's easier to identify and speak to your relevant experience. So if you're someone who struggles to talk about yourself and someone's like, tell me about a time you did X, Y, and Z, and your mind just goes blank, you you'll really benefit from like having gone through the process of gotten clear on what those stories are. So this will make the rest of the process just so much easier, and you'll be able to do things more consistently, and you'll be more prepared, I think, for the next steps in the job search process. I have a question here. All right. Do you have a specific action plan for someone transitioning and help with pulling the skills from extensive past experience to apply to a new UX career? Do I have a specific plan for that career path? No, but I have a general one that people have used to transfer into UX, if that's helpful. And so I would argue that a lot of this is really helpful. Like having extensive past experience is good and important, but it is your job as the job seeker to figure out which pieces of that are most relevant for those UX jobs. So do you have research experience? Do you have data analysis experience? Do you have experience, running focus? Like what is it that you have done? And if you're not sure what's most relevant, or you're just guessing at the moment, look at the job postings. The job postings will tell you, the qualification section will tell you what to highlight. And you may find that it's beneficial to eliminate experience that's less relevant. So you can just have your resume highlighting what is relevant. Tell me if that is helpful or if you have more questions there. So conveying your value is the external part of this, right? So we've taken the time to kind of understand our values, our goals, our strengths, our experience, and now we need to move this into something that's going to make sense and really be of service for someone else's needs. So let's talk about conveying your value effectively. Let me take a sip of water here. I'm talking a lot. So there's another 3 steps that we offer here. We do some more reviewing. We revisit. Oh, that's it. Hi, Laura. That's a really good suggestion. Let me just put that up here. I love GA. Yes, they have a lot of good workshops and webinars. Good suggestion. So first, we want to take a look at those job postings that you've selected and pay particular attention to the qualifications. Job seekers do one of 2 things. They completely ignore the qualification section of a job posting because they're really focused on the responsibilities and whether or not they want to do the job. But the qualifications tell us whether, what about our experience they need to know so that they can move us forward in that process. And then some people look at those qualifications and think, I don't check these perfectly. I must not be the right fit. This is pointless. So instead of assuming you are unqualified when your experience doesn't align perfectly or exactly, or there's just a couple of items there that you like where you don't check the box, right? You know it, I know it. You can't conjure up 15 years of experience in a field if you just don't have it necessarily. I want you to ask yourself, how are you qualified for the role? So what qualifications do you have? When I talk about this, I always give the same 2 examples, and I'm sure there's some people here who've heard these before, but in case you're new, let me share. I have seen a medical doctor, like a physician, like a research MD nonetheless, almost not apply for a job that required a master's degree in science because those credentials weren't exactly the same. And it's 100% true. They're not exactly the same, but what we want to do is put together make the most compelling case for our candidacy. And that means making sure that they know you have an MD and that you do have a background in science, and putting that with the rest of your qualifications. I've also seen this with a client who wanted to make a transition into human resources and didn't have human resource experience, but she had done hiring, she'd been a hiring manager, she'd done performance evaluation, she'd done a lot of coaching, so we were able to kind of name the domains of HR experience that she had as a way to kind of build a case for her candidacy. So I want you to kind of think about it like that, like we're building a case for your candidacy. And so we don't just want to like leave things blank if we can speak to it to some degree, because if you think about it, every applicant is bringing like a ton of different experience to the table. And so to give you the best shot, we want to make sure you're doing your due diligence in conveying what is actually true about your experience. And finally, it requires 3 years of experience. I know, it does look like that sometimes. I want you to try writing your resume like an actual human being. is going to read it. And I know this is a very controversial resume writing approach here, but I don't, and I have never written for applicant tracking systems. I have gone down like a TikTok rabbit hole of people who think it's, strategic to put a bunch of keywords in your resume based on the job posting, of people who think you should add keywords in white font to kind of trigger approval from the applicant tracking system. So like all these ways to kind of like work around the applicant tracking system that I have never employed as a career coach, and that I never, the software, the applicant tracking system that we use would not have allowed. And so I want to show you just what we do instead, because I think there's some keyword components to it, but we write like people, like we're talking to people. People don't speak in keywords. So I try to use a summary of qualifications at the top of our client's resume. And there's a couple of reasons that I do this. One is it's super simple and easy to read. Comparative examples of these resumes. Can you say more, what resumes, Laura? Can you tell me what you're talking about, or what you're referring to specifically there? So the summary of qualifications is something that we use to help our clients convey their qualifications really through the hiring process. But we start with people's resume, and being able to say things like, here are my years of experience. Here are the specific domains of experience that you're looking for. Here are the soft skills that I have that you're looking for. Here are the technical skills I have that you're looking for, right? Like these are the sorts of things that we're trying to offer a framework to help our clients convey quickly and concisely. So if you can see here, and it's not super obvious just because of the font, but like these are bold. X years of experience, demonstrated ability to, effective Y, confident user of. Those are all bolded because those are prompts that you can reuse from job to job to job, resume to resume to resume. These are what follows. The text that follows is from the qualification section. So these are the soft skills they're asking for. These are the number of years and the type of experience that they're asking for. This is the social media experience that they're asking for, and so these are the technical skills. Oh, okay, good. Because I was going to say, I don't have any of those examples. I only have the human being one. But if you've ever seen a resume, thank you for bringing this up, because here's what I see, and I'll tell you. So maybe out in the wild, if you see resume examples, you'll know. When you look at a resume and underneath the name and the contact, like the header, if you see just like columns of keywords of competencies, if you see a personal summary that's about the person rather than the job, like this is about the job, that's another example. Also, sometimes you see objective statements at the top here, which is neither there nor here, but is another example of what people do at the top there. This gives people a way to talk to people who wrote the job description and to say on like a silver platter, like, here's the experience that you're looking for. I have it. It also goes a long way towards making people feel really confident about actually applying for their jobs. And it also helps our clients tell their stories in a consistent, compelling, and concise way throughout the hiring process, right? Because if we have, let's just say this company was looking specifically for like social media and Twitter experience. So like this wouldn't be the job necessarily to tell about your Facebook ads experience, right? Like they're looking for something very specific, and it allows you to tailor your candidacy around their needs, not in a way where we're twisting ourselves into a pretzel to try and impress people, but just as a way to like, as a cookie cutter, to help distill our experience into like nice sound bites. Let me see here. I have a question from Pamela. All right, Jen, how do you handle addressing results and deliverables? Increase profit by, saved company, what? Yeah, actually, these are great examples. This is what I would do. And just because you asked, I'll point out, I'm sure there's other people with the same thought here. Sometimes if you don't have, the exact percentage or like number, sometimes I'll just use verbs. A lot of my clients are in very process-oriented work, or they're in chaotic work environments where this stuff isn't captured and measured and isn't necessarily part of anyone's evaluation. So sometimes I will just say, improved, increased, decreased, whatever it might be. In general, I do like percentages because I think it kind of holds scale constant. So when possible, I do prefer, but sometimes people have like really nice revenue numbers or saved company numbers. And so we'll use those if they're, if they're significant. More than one good way to do it. Those are just my favorite. All right. Kika, I see your question. Let me pull it up here. Hi, Kika. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about resume formats. I've heard to keep the format super simple also for software. So I don't do anything for software, but I will tell you I keep it super simple for human readers. When I write resumes for people, they are in a Google Doc. I typically use Arial, very simple fonts. Now, there are some of you here that I know have like a design background. If you are a designer applying for design roles, you have more leeway than anyone else to use those skills on your resume. But for both camps, designers and non-designers, I think it's super critical that the content be relevant and easy to read. So I would just keep that in mind. I don't use anything other than like bold. I use like one kind of bullet point that's the dark bold one because I think it draws the eye the easiest. I don't use any tables. I hate tables. Tables are interesting because even though I don't not use them for ATS, like I actually think when some of the content just gets pulled through in text format, tables can kind of mess that up. So it's nothing we can't kind of figure out on the other end, but I like for things to look nice the whole way through. So yes, keep it simple, but also just keep it simple for the people who are doing the reading and not so much for the software. I wouldn't worry too much about the software. Recruiters can go in and look at the PDF that you've attached pretty easily. Awesome. Keep the questions coming. They're really good questions, and I'm happy to pause here. So I'll keep going until I see more questions, but happy to take a break and answer anything that comes up. The other piece here is most of our clients get traction with their resume. There's like no two ways about that. But there are people who either have really active networks or relationships that they're extroverts compared to most of my clients and are kind of willing to go out to people and share where they're at. Or there's people who, maybe have something that they're struggling to convey effectively in their resume. Maybe they're making a transition. Maybe they feel like their gap is too big. And that's where I think your network can really come in handy because, when you have someone on the inside of, an organization advocating for you, I think it can help fill in some of the blanks that maybe people don't see when they see your resume. That said, when I think about transforming the way you think about networking, I'm thinking about helping people to see the bigger, broader picture here around why we maintain relationships, create relationships, nurture relationships in the professional sphere, which isn't just for hopefully someone to hand you a job. I mean, it might be that might be the inspiration here, but that's really something that happens with existing relationships or as you nurture relationships over time. As you are cultivating relationships up front, if this is something you need to do, if you don't have a super engaged or wide network, if you don't have the network you need, I want you to think about ways that you can find people who share your interest, who are maybe in the same field, or maybe a job seekers group, or maybe an alumni group of your college or university or your program or your boot camp, whatever it might be. So finding people who share your interests, leveraging friends, like there's no rule that says your personal friends can't help you out in your career, asking for introductions from those people and finding a way to really stay engaged with the people who kind of resonate with you the most, I think is really critical. And so often I think people are looking for that transaction, like, oh, if I knew enough people, someone would give me a job. And yes, it works that nicely and cleanly sometimes, but a lot of times what you're actually getting from your network is information and introductions. And that's also what you are able to offer your network, right? Introductions and information. So keep that in mind here. See another question. Pull this up. Regarding resumes for transitioners, chronological or functional. So I really like chronological resumes. And I don't think I'm trying to think if I've ever written a non-chronological resume. I don't think I have. I think I've considered it a couple times. So here's my take on this. And I think there's room for good discussion here. So if there's other recruiters in the room, I'm happy to hear from them. But I think sometimes when I see resumes that are out of order chronologically, which is so the norm, it feels like someone is trying to like obscure something. Like it feels like there's something missing. And I find it more compelling when people can tell their story about why they want to return to something in their past or what parts of their past might be more relevant going forward. So because you're asking if you should use something chronological or functional, I'm assuming that something in your past may be a better match for your goal target job than your most recent job. In which case, sometimes the summary of qualifications really helps us get at that because we can name those qualifications that you have from your previous job in that summary of qualifications section. Another thing I might do is just really tighten up the description under jobs that feel less relevant and focus on the most relevant parts of that experience. And I think sometimes, and I've done this for one particular client comes to mind here, which is, having a relevant section and then an additional experience section. So in one case, I have pulled a job from their very far back history. Actually, I think it was probably at least 15 years ago, and it might have been more. And positioning that as relevant experience and then additional experience, because what I wanted people to see was that this person had worked in a particular sector at actually a fairly high level very early on in their career, but also was currently employed and like had a substantial experience. Like I didn't want people to think this person hadn't worked since this last job ended. And so that's what I kind of pay attention to. So I'm getting another question here. Let me just pull this up. What if the relevant experience is from 15 years ago? So here's what I would do. Just to experiment, just to see what the first page looks like. I want you to think about the first page of the resume because that can really make or break you. Can you come up with a summary of qualifications that acknowledges the relevant qualifications in your work history? Can you either take your relevant experience from 15 years ago and put it at the top, call it relevant experience, and keep your current or most recent work history visible so it doesn't look like if that job ended 15 years ago, I don't want your first page to look like there's a 15-year gap in your employment, if you know what I mean. Unless there is, in which case that's what your work experience is. But a lot of times, sometimes when people move things around, you can't always tell from the first page, like, does this person currently have a job? Have they worked recently? Or is their experience from 20 years ago? And to see, can you keep your current experience short enough so that chronologically that relevant experience shows up on the first page, or, should you experiment with relevant experience and then additional experience? Hello, yay. I am a former qualitative researcher. So I totally get it. Ooh, banking and kitchen design. Oh, very interesting. So this is very, very interesting. And so this is a lot of different experience, right? And so there's two things that I just want you to think about. And I realize this has nothing to do with networking. So thanks for humoring me, everyone who's watching me take questions as they come up. There's the relevant experience, but then there's also always the through line. Like, what is the through line? I'd be curious to hear what that is for you, if it exists. It almost always exists. Like, I've seen people with incredibly disparate interests and resumes that look like they've done a lot of different things. So I'm just curious, like, what would the through line be for you? I had one client who works in tech currently, but, had a very advanced degree in music and like wrote a dissertation in music and she had a really beautiful like metaphor for like how her work now was like having an audience and like, managing teams was like having an orchestra. So sometimes there's just that through line. And I think it's something to just look for. It may not be there, but it often is. Like, we're often using very similar skills and values in these roles. So I would just ask yourself that. I think it could be worthwhile. Okay, so let me just share some simple hacks here on how to like operationalize some better networking efforts. So instead of avoiding it, right, you could position yourself as like eager and curious and really get clear on who would be helpful for you to meet? And would it be, how could you get those introductions? Could you ask friends of friends? Do you belong to any groups? Could you research groups? Like, always ask, what is the point of networking? Because, um, you know, it's, we don't really generally do it for fun. I just want to pull this back up. Sorry, I'm going back and forth here. Making the world work in a better way through design and helping others. Yeah, there's always a through line. So yes, my pleasure. Okay, not sure what to say about yourself, to having just templates, templates that are easy. So if you're kind of going through this process, like, I need to start from scratch, do yourself a favor and come up with some templates that you can use and reuse and edit, so that you don't have to like do the work of starting from scratch and psyching yourself up. We do have these templates. So everyone who signs up for our winter accelerator gets access to work words and our Uncomplicate Your Job Search toolkit for life. So those products, those digital resources have those templates in them, but you can also, create your own or Google if you'd rather. And instead of feeling nervous about asking for help, you are also contributing. Like, you are a willing participant in this process. It may not be a completely fair trade with everyone you meet, but it's more like putting it in a general pot, right? We're all looking for support. We're all looking for guidance. We're all looking for connections. And you showing up for the people who come to you is what pays off for what you're taking in the long term here. All right, this is a big one here. I've had a lot of conversations with people about this lately. This is giving yourself permission to re-engage your job search. Um, the job search is one of those things where I've really never seen people be unsuccessful. Like, the clients that we've worked with have not gotten jobs unless they've stopped searching. In the short term, they sometimes stop searching because they're tired, they need a break, but more often it's that like other important things have come up and they've needed to shift priorities. Some other examples of things that come up is like, things get better for them at work, their terrible boss leaves and they decide to stay, they get the promotion they were promised. Those are the sorts of things, that's how people fail in this process. Like, to me, that's not really failing, but that's where, people end up not getting offers, is when honestly something better unfolds or they take a break. And for those people who take a break, sometimes they take bridge jobs, sometimes they do consulting, sometimes they're, really not working. And I think it's really difficult for them to re-engage because people feel guilty, they feel bad, they feel like they've gone too far, not doing enough. And it's hard to feel like re-engaging is going to be worthwhile. So what I want to offer with this step is that having to re-engage your job search is pretty normal for most people. Most people, even people who keep job searching until they get their offer and accept and leave their current organization, will need to at some point take a break, take a vacation, just have other things pop up that distract them from their goals for a week, a couple weeks, who knows, right? So your job search may need more time than someone else's. Your job search may need to be put on the back burner. You may need more effort at some points in this process than others. You may need to get rest. Like, you may be tired and really benefit both like personally and professionally from stopping for a while. So I want you to remember that. You may also benefit from tracking. So make sure you're keeping track of your work. There's different ways people do this, and I don't care which way you choose. So if you're a qualitative researcher, maybe you really like journaling and writing about it. If you are an MBA in finance, maybe you really like having an Excel spreadsheet. Doesn't matter to me. But keep track of what you're doing and keep track of what you're learning, because that will help you really assess your efforts instead of just kind of using how we feel on any given day. I don't know about you, but I can't use that as a good metric for evaluating my whole life. I want you to think about having a strategy, a plan, and that means having some focus, applying, consistently but selectively, connecting with people, kind of going through each of these 5 phases and making the shifts that you need here. You may benefit from a break and you may benefit from support. So whether it's peers or friends or experts or whoever you might hire to help you with this or whatever goals you're working towards, it may be smoother, it may be more efficient, it may be more effective, it may be more fun if you don't do it alone. Now, how to know if you're making progress? Like, what does your job search look like if how do you evaluate if you don't have an offer, if you haven't accepted an offer? How do we evaluate our job search? So here are some things I look for. Do we have greater self-insight and knowledge about our goals? Like, do we know more about our value and our needs in this process? Because that's a win. That's traction in my book. Do we have greater comfort and skill and tools for communicating our value? Do we have a resume that we're proud of and know how to use? Do we have a LinkedIn account that makes it easy to like connect with new people? Or do we have like LinkedIn profile shame and so we're not doing any networking, right? Like those are the sorts of things that count as traction, where you can confidently connect with people and share your work and experience. That's traction. More efficient applications. The first few times when I teach our clients how to do the summary of qualifications for themselves, I always say, this is going to take 3 to 5 jobs before it happens smoothly and fast. The first 3 to 5 times, you're going to be like, who is this lady? She's slowing me down. I regret signing up with her. And after that, you'll feel much better about it. So if you find yourself being able to turn things around more quickly, that is a win. Getting more interview opportunities, having conversations, right? Like learning more about different roles or different companies or whatever your learning goals are there. Walking away from red flags, giving yourself permission to walk away. Huge win, enormous. It's very hard, to walk away from a job offer or to withdraw from an interview process. So when that happens, I celebrate it with our clients because they're taking critical action to make sure their next job is a good fit by not accepting a job that's clearly not it, right? Connecting with yourself and your community, learning and optimizing your efforts, refining, deciding, how you're refocusing your search, all of that is really, really critical. So if you find yourself checking some of these boxes, these are wins. And to me, they're signs that we're moving in the right direction. These are my favorite pictures of job seekers. So I put this into put job search or job seeker into a stock image library, and this is what it came up with. And I thought it was very dramatic, but I have been told, and I've used this slide before, that it's actually very accurate, that this is what job searching looks like. But I just want you to know, if this is what the process feels like for you now, that it often feels this way, and then we end up in a very different place, right? We end up with really insightful conversations, we end up with interviews, we end up with offers. So things can change really quickly in the job search process. And so I just want to remind you of that even though it can feel really tough, it's something you can definitely move through here. So I have a question here. Let me take a few questions. I realize this is a little bit longer than I normally go, but I'm happy to keep going up until 4. So bring your questions on and I'll share a little bit about the Accelerator too, in case anyone's interested. All right. I have been working for a decade and job hopped a lot when I was younger. I decided to remove older positions from when I first graduated because it would have been a whole extra page. Do you think this is a good idea, or should I list my older positions? My thought is my older jobs are not as relevant to what I'm doing now, but also not sure if it looks bad to have this gap in my resume. All right. My thoughts are the older jobs are. So if it's experience that's more, I've been working for a decade now and job hopped a lot. Okay, so a decade is not a ton of work experience, but maybe I'm getting old. So that would put you in just kind of leaving the young professional into the mid-career, phase of your career. So here are a couple of thoughts. If they're really not relevant, and you have like a robust first page that positions you well, I think it's okay to eliminate earlier experience. And typically around 10 years is where we see like that first job or two maybe coming off the resume. I think that's totally fine to do and to experiment with. Because 10 years for some people is like 2 pages and it's like a page for others, it's hard for me to be super specific. So I would just want your experience to look as robust as possible for your target jobs. Another thing I've seen people do, and I've seen people do this in marketing, and especially people who stay in marketing for their whole career, is they won't include job descriptions for their first marketing assistant role, but they will list the agency that they worked for and their dates of employment. So I've seen people consolidate experience by removing sort of the bullet points, if you will, and the actual experience, and just left the title, the employer, and the dates of employment. And, that may be something that works for you. It sounds like you're kind of you've made some kind of a transition. So this maybe less helpful. But sometimes if you think that the employer, the title, and the years of experience will have meaning to your potential employer, like it allows them to see that you have certain experience either in the industry or in a relevant industry, I think it can be helpful. If it's the job itself, then you may want to include a bullet point or two. Should I list my older positions? The other thing I personally did when I was at this point, and I was closer to like 15 years of experience, is like I did remove experience, but I linked to my LinkedIn profile, and I keep all of my work experience on my LinkedIn profile. I haven't been an active job seeker in several years, but that's what I would do is I would tailor my experience to like the last 10 years, but include a link to my full experience on LinkedIn in my header so that if people wanted to see all the way back, they'd be welcome to that history here. Let me know if that was helpful. Sometimes I have so many ideas that I'm not sure my answers are super helpful. So please let me know if I can be more helpful here. All right, I promised that I had a discount code. So let me say a little bit more about and let me just say, ask your questions if you have them, because I'm going to wrap up after this. I just want to make sure I address the questions about the winter accelerator, which someone asked about at the beginning. So feel free to drop any questions about the content rather, or your job search. I'm happy to answer those as I wrap up. But for those of you who are looking to generate some momentum and have some support for your job search, we run seasonal job search accelerators, and we have one that's starting on Monday. So it's 4 weeks of office hours, which I host, 4 weeks of you submitting your resume and or LinkedIn profile and getting feedback from me so that it's in a good place and you learn how to tailor it effectively. You get access to our job search curriculum, which walks you through from beginning to end. And you also get our work words library and uncomplicate your job search toolkit, for life. And those will offer some of the templates that I was referring to, as well as a ton of language and suggested language for your resume, your cover letter, and the summary of qualifications specifically. And what I did today, right before this webinar started, is I went ahead and if you go to workwonderscareers.com, let me see if I can't remember. Sometimes I have a hard time getting my comments posted here. Let me see if that works. If you go to workwonderscareers.com, the button at the top links directly to the accelerator. So if you use the code New Year, New Job 2022, it's going to give you the early bird discount. So it's going to take $75 off the total price for participating with us. So if anyone wants that, we've got like 4 spots left, and we'd be happy to have you join us. It's always a really good time, and doing this with, a small cohort of people. Obviously I'm there to give advice. We also have co-working sessions available for people who need a little extra support and accountability to get stuff done. But I just don't want to discount how amazing it is to have peers who are not just committed to their success, but really invested, in yours. And my heart warms every time someone shows up a little discouraged and gets all kinds of support, not just from me, but from the other folks that are there. So, good question, Laura. I offer private services, right? So you can go to our job search strategy services, and those options, Sprint and Elevate, are private services where you work with me. I will say that if you work with me privately in either of those options, you get access to the accelerator for free. So if you are looking, if group support feels like it would be adequate for you, then that's the option, we're offering right now. And if you need a little extra hand holding, or if you're someone who really only does work, with a lot of accountability and focus, and you want to work with me privately, those options are available there too. And you can request an assessment to get started. I'm actually pretty much booked up on assessment calls this week. But if you wanted to join us for the accelerator, just make note of that in your assessment form, and I can try and get on the phone with you. It would have to be Friday because I'm on calls all day tomorrow. So Grace, hi Grace, I hope you are well. I sent you an email. If you are changing careers and industries, would it be better to get domain industry level experience first? Sometimes it's tougher to break into a new industry and get the exact job in the industry. That is a good observation. Thank you, Pamela. That's nice of you to say. Grace, I am tempted to say both of yes, I think one of my strategies if I were in your shoes, would be to like figure out the experience I have that I could, like, what's the pivot point, right? And oftentimes, what that means would be like if I had role experience that I could pivot into a new industry, that might be what I would do. Like if I were to go and look for a job, I would think about like HR, right? Or career development, those kinds of roles. But I do think it's possible to do both. It would help me to know more about what the targets were so that I could give like some or brainstorm a little bit. Um, Thank you, Pamela. I appreciate you sharing that. But I think, yes, I think it's helpful if you can find a pivot point, but sometimes you can do both at the same time. And actually doing both at the same time is something that's probably best nurtured or facilitated. If your literal experience doesn't translate as smoothly as you'd like, I would think about that's a great place for your network and relationships to perhaps come forward for you. All right. Any other questions? Did I answer everyone's questions okay? All right. All right. Well, I so appreciate your question. Oh, I have one here. Well, let's see. An additional question regarding older experience. Doesn't starting a date from 25 years ago right off put up a red flag for age? I think probably. So I want to think about the way I've seen age work. And I think the context matters here. If the job requires 5 years of experience, then yes, 25 years of experience might be you might look overqualified for the job. I've worked in academia, I worked in faculty hiring, and people had experience from like way more than 25 years ago on their CVs, right? But that's like a very specific kind of niche field. So I would ask yourself, does 25 years of experience make you look overqualified? Am I going to kind of cast myself out by not looking like a more junior fit? Is there a way that I could consolidate? I don't, I don't, I don't want to say age. I know age discrimination happens, but I think what also often happens is that people look overqualified, and recruiters or hiring managers worry that you'll be bored, or disinterested, or that you aren't the right fit. So if that is the case, and you have to flag the years of experience, if you have to kind of like acknowledge that by going back into your work history for relevant experience, I would try to explain that in the cover letter, or even potentially in the summary of qualifications, like ex-professional transitioning back to Y with experience in A, B, and C. That might help you do that, just as a example formula there. You guys asked some good questions today. These are hard. Now I like want to get in your business and figure out how to make your resumes look good. Thank you so much for joining me. It was lovely to see some familiar faces and some new names. So be in touch if there's anything, if you'd like to work with us, go to workwonderscareers.com. The Accelerator is right on the homepage. Otherwise, you can search our services and request an assessment if you are interested in working with me privately. All right. I hope, new comments. What am I missing here? Thank you, Kika. It was so nice to have you here. Happy to have you here. I meant my relevant. Yep. So if that's the case, okay, good. It sounds like I answered your question. Okay. If your relevant experience and qualifications are from 25 years ago, just try to keep everything as consolidated as possible. Excellent. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you all. And if you thought this was useful and you want to share it with your friends, let them know they've got like 24 hours, left to watch before I take this back down. So have a really great rest of your day. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your trust, and good luck with your job search, everyone. I'll talk to you soon.